All right, GM, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. Feels like we had a couple technical issues with the spaces here. I think we got them all fixed. Just let us know in the comments if you're having problems hearing anyone. Folks, today is Monday, August 26th, 2024. It is a hot morning here in Chicago today, folks. We are in the 90s, final heat wave of summer. Feels like a nice analogy for this crypto and maybe NFT market, which are actively heating up, feeling hot again, perhaps for the first time in weeks. We got some big news from Jerome Powell on Friday, perhaps driving some of this. I'm sure we will get into it on the show here this morning. Folks, no Farokh today. He is traveling to Asia for a slew of conferences. In fact, he's going to be out for a majority of the next few weeks. But you've got Mando and myself still here holding down the fort. We're going to have some guest co-hosts sprinkle in here across the next few shows as well. Mando, Jim, how you doing?
Doing amazing, man. What a good weekend. Glad you're feeling pumped again. Everything's looking good.
It really is. So, you and I both do these daily market updates, and you do every day. I usually do every day, but I will skip a weekend day here and there. I would say this Saturday was the first time, perhaps all summer, where I was chomping at the bit to get to the keyboard to write the update because we had a lot of green action.
Yeah, green in everything, right? Green in majors, green in altcoins, green in meme coins, and green in NFTs. But actually, NFTs feel the best out of all of the asset classes right now. All the different slices of crypto, let's say.
We're feeling good, folks. We are feeling good. We're going to talk about that all on today's show. So what are we talking about? We'll start with Mando's market report. We'll talk the Telegram CEO getting arrested. Is ton a buy now? We'll talk the Ethereum Foundation selling. Some somewhat controversial Vitalik comments on the timeline. We've got RFK dropping out of the race. That's impacting poly market. We've got memes rallying. We've got NFTs rallying, fantasy top cooking, and more. So we've got a lot on the docket here today. With that, we're going to keep it a tighter show. Why don't we just get right into Mando's market report?
Who is the man, macro daddy of the land? Can you dig it?
GM. So can everyone hear me? Is that all right? That's now working. I know Sims was freaking out there for a little bit.
I think so. Give us thumbs up in the comments, folks, in the space.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, so a better weekend. We were kind of rallying on Friday, and then after we went off air, it really started to pick up some pace. So there were obviously the major thing on Friday was the comments by Jerome Powell, who's the Fed chair, basically indicated that we're going to start seeing rate cuts. That was already being priced in, but I think, I don't know, maybe we just needed that to have a little bit more bullishness happening in the market in general. There obviously been talk about a short squeeze. That sentiment was very low despite the high price, and maybe just a very small bit of positive sentiment was all we needed to have a little bit of FOMO. But we saw Bitcoin go all the way up to around 65K. It's now settled just shy of 64K. Solana, I think, topped out around 162, 163. It's still around that sort of area now, 161. And ETH got to around 2,800, I think, but has since gone back down to about 2,700. So ETH slightly underperforming. We saw a bunch of L1s also rip into the back of that. So kind of continuing that theme of other L1s performing alongside Solana and a bit of like a mini, well, I wouldn't say altcoin season, but there's definitely the whiff that, okay, some of these are starting to move after being down a lot. Let's see if they can sustain that bounce. So yeah, generally just a pretty positive sentiment there. In terms of this week, what we have, the number one thing is NVIDIA results, which are in a couple of days. And actually you've seen the number one sector in crypto over the last week or so has been these AI coins. All of them are up substantially. They're up about 30 to 50% kind of across the board. I think FET is probably one of the major ones. NIA, Render, some of these like decentralized storage coins are all up. So people getting bullish just on the back of AI becoming a more focused topic. You actually saw Binance Labs come out today and said they were going to make a lot of investments into that space too, which I thought was relatively interesting. So maybe I don't think there's that much value to a lot of these right now, but maybe that is still going to be a medium-term trend, and people still like to buy into them. I think FET is probably the most interesting, but they did that merger recently. It sold off the back of that. It's since kind of recovered from that sell-off. So that's probably the number one coin to be looking at in the AI space. But yeah, that's this week. We also have PCE inflation, which is on Friday, I think, and we have a read of US GDP too. So not huge pieces of news, either of those. I think now that we know the Fed is going to be cutting rates, PCE inflation probably won't be a big deal. I think everyone will be focused on NVIDIA and the moves on the back of that. NVIDIA has, in general, absolutely smashed results for the last 2 years. Every single results, it has an even better set come through. So it obviously bounced very, very strongly, as did pretty much all of macro since that sell-off we had about a month ago or 3 weeks ago. And it's kind of back near all-time highs. The NASDAQ is still kind of slightly off all-time highs, but the S&P is getting close towards it. So that'll be the next main thing to see if we see like a kick on there in all of these Magnificent Seven stocks. I think people will be focused on that quite a lot. And then it's really just been the left field stuff. So I think a lot of the meme coin trading is still on Solana, but there's definitely been a huge amount has been moving towards Tron still. I know you've obviously been tracking some of those Tron coins, Tyler, and has been moving to BNB. I think BNB DEX volume to continue to slightly outperform Solana at the moment. So let's see. It feels like some of the more degenerate stuff is kind of moving slightly multi-chain, and it'll be interesting to see if that develops. In terms of more broader crypto news, the only thing that I thought was interesting today was Vitalik. I don't know if you saw this, that he kind of came out and basically said that he thought DeFi's a bunch of bullshit, which I thought was pretty hilarious, given that's quite a big thing for ETH. But I think that's caused quite a lot of like discussion on the timeline. And I guess the other main thing is people talking about the Telegram CEO obviously getting arrested and what this means for crypto. I think Polymarket are making bets on when he's going to get out of prison. It's 25% chance he gets out this month, it looks like, on Polymarket. So he could be in there for a long stint. It looks like Telegram hasn't really, or the Ton coin even, hasn't really recovered. I do think that was a little at risk, given its market cap is pretty massive. It's still sitting there at like 28 billion FTV. So if there is a more substantial issue with Telegram, that one does look a little precarious.
Yeah, I was curious for your thoughts on that. There's a few topics to dive into, but maybe we start with the Telegram one. So, folks, the news, if you missed this, I'd be surprised if you missed it. It was all over the timeline, the number one story. So, Telegram CEO Pavel Durov, who was arrested in France here over the weekend, apparently on charges tied to conduct of users on Telegram. Charges linked to terrorism, sale of drugs, stolen goods, fraud, money laundering, and more. I think the big open question, the outcry on the timeline is how much should he be, associated with, charged with crimes users conduct on his platform. I think that's been the big debate. We've seen folks saying that free speech is under attack. There's also the conspiracy theories of why he would be flying to France, because it seems like it was well known that he was kind of a person non grata in France. So why did he go there? Now there's the reports of this of his crypto teacher he was traveling with. I don't know if folks saw this. An attractive young female who was documenting their entire trip. So have you been following any of the conspiracy theories? Mando?
Yeah, so I was under the impression that he had French citizenship. I'm just looking into that now. So yeah, it does look like he was granted French citizenship in 2021.
Okay.
Le Monde has said through an exception. I'm just reading through Le Monde. So he was a French citizen from 2021. He is Russian. There was some talk about the fact it's interesting, right? So he left. This guy's story is he basically created a Facebook clone in Russia when he was young, probably about 14 years ago, and then left Russia after they wanted basically to get customer data in a very similar sort of way. He wouldn't give it up, and then he was basically forced to by the Kremlin. He then left, raised a bunch of money, went to the UAE, actually tried to do a Telegram ICO coin back in the day, was reprimanded by the SEC, had to give all that money back. Telegram obviously grew substantially even during this period. They then did the Tong coin more recently, which is kind of done by an independent foundation. And then this has happened. There was some talk that he had gone to some of the ex-Russian or Soviet states. Like he went to Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan recently. And there was some talk that maybe he'd met Putin there. And that maybe set this off. It's interesting to me that like the Russian officials are basically coming out and saying you shouldn't be having this guy locked up. And I didn't realize he was still close to Russia. I thought he was like almost an enemy of the state in Russia. And I think that kind of says a lot, in my opinion, that maybe why is Russia defending this guy and saying that France, this is a political arrest of this guy, Pavel Durov. Like, I think that's relatively interesting. And they're having to publicly deny that Putin's met him and all this sort of stuff. Now, I think how the privacy works there is the key to the encryption is actually him and his brother. Yeah, that's what I was under the impression of, because obviously it's end-to-end encryption. So I don't know what happens in that scenario. Telegram has come out and said publicly, we were following all the rules. It's very, very clear that a lot of illicit and illegal activity was being spoken on Telegram. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, that's been kind of a question in tech in general. Like, should the actors or users of their tech be the ones that are charged, or the people that are the creators / managers of the tech? There's been questions about that right the way through with crypto, right? We spoke about how the tornado devs are currently facing prosecution for similar sort of reasons. Back in the day, you could say, the Ross Ulbricht case is maybe has echoes of a similar sort of set of morals around who should be at fault here. But there was also saying that, this is just a shot across the bow, like they were coming after X as well. They've been publicly, EU officials have been publicly reprimanding Elon recently. And there's obviously very tight controls about what can be said online and restrictions about that. And I'm sure Telegram breaches a bunch of those, but it's just, that's a more deeper question about society in general. I think about, we've spoken about how even the Twitter app has become a bit more fringe, a lot more risky content, which if you said in public might even get you arrested, is said on X with kind of little to no reprimand. And whenever there is, it's kind of shouted down or made to be seen as ridiculous. But I don't know. I don't know where all that stands. You could argue that these things can be used to incite hate, but at the same time, do you want that much government control? Free speech seems to be one of these central cores of Western civilization that everyone kind of pushes for. But at the same time, I feel as though a lot of people have other very strong values about protection and or anti-terrorism or anti-trafficking, all this sort of stuff. You can't have very strong rules on free speech, and then also similarly have equally strong rules on some of the other things, because I think it's they just don't work together, in my opinion.
It's a tricky subject. It's a long debate in crypto. I think one that's been going on for years. I see both sides. I feel like I land somewhat in. I'm a fan of freedom of speech, of course. I also am generally a fan of just like common sense law and application of law. So in the example where let's say Wizard of Soho makes a meme call that goes south in rugs, and someone gets really pissed off at him and posts his address and tells people to go burn his house down, and then someone actually does it, I don't know. I feel like someone should be held accountable for that. And I think there's gray areas. It's not very black and white. And then there's a lot of questions of how far do you extrapolate, the actors tied to these things. So we'll certainly see. There's a little bit more to this issue as well now with, your comments on his ties to Russia rooting for him to get out. I imagine we're going to get more information this week, but we'll find out. You kind of open this. Well, one of my leading questions is ton of buy here. So kind of pulling this back to the market itself. Ton coin down 18% on the week. We see the steep drop off as soon as the news broke. It's still at 14 billion market cap.
I don't think this guy's getting out of prison. Let me put it that way. He's being charged for 20 years in France for a range of very serious legal issues. Even if he gets out, he'll be under house arrest somewhere in France. This guy isn't going back to the UAE. So I would say that this is perhaps, if it was just a classic CEO, CEO of a normal company, but he owns 100%, as far as I'm aware, of Telegram. And he is one of the two people basically who will hold the keys to the encryption. Now, I don't know where his brother resides, but I would assume it's in the UAE too. But, if your brother's in jail and they're saying, basically, we're going to lock him up for 20 years unless you start playing ball, I don't know where that situation goes. I feel like it should be lower than this. That's my guess. I was surprised that it was only down 20%. Like when I compare it to like the SEC doing their, I forget how much XRP dropped the day like the SEC launched its investigation into XRP. But to me, this feels more serious than that. And Ton has been built in a way where it's meant to be independent. So obviously its own independent blockchain, but it's using Telegram. Telegram is its rails.
Right.
For everything. And if Telegram starts getting blocked in the EU, and I don't know which other countries, but if it starts becoming a political app that can be blocked in certain regions, like we saw with like what people talk about TikTok and that sort of stuff, that seems like quite a big deal.
I would agree. I saw the chatter of his ton of buy this weekend. I'd say no, it's not.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's still like if you look at the chart, I mean, it looks like summer chop. If you don't know
that's what I felt. I thought it should be lower. I would buy it, but it should be lower, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think there's also, so Ton has its own meme coin ecosystem, which I forget about. So I don't really look at it all that much. But you still got the Knot coin holding at 975 million. You've got a few other coins up here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm surprised a few of those aren't down more. So let's look at Knot. Knot's down. So it's down. Okay, it's down. Well, it's down in line with the meme coin market. It's not down tremendously since the news broke. So it's down like 30%, 20-30%. So that's a drop you would expect or a levered bet. But I guess this kind of raises a key man risk question. So what would happen to Ethereum if Vitalik got arrested for some reason? You think
I would say Vitalik being arrested is way less of a risk, if I'm honest, genuinely. Like, if Vitalik gets arrested, like, obviously, I think does he lead the ETH Foundation, or at least he's something involved in the ETH Foundation? But he does have a substantial amount of ETH, but I think it's like $1 billion or less than $1 billion, right? At least in his public wallet. I don't think that would be like.
Yeah,
he doesn't own ETH in the same way that Durov owns Telegram. And the Ton coin, although it's a public blockchain, it clearly has a decentralized aspect to it. Its main top of funnel, or kind of its only top of funnel, is using Telegram. So kind of feels like that's quite a big deal.
Yeah. Agree. Way higher, way more severe key man risk on Telegram and the impact on Ton right now.
Yeah.
But perhaps we seg into some of Vitalik's comments. So Beanie said the biggest threat to Ethereum price appreciation is Vitalik. himself and that he talks too much. Satoshi's silence is infinitely bullish in comparison. So this is stemming from a few of Vitalik's comments over the weekend. So we had folks call him out saying that basically he didn't know what Aave was. He was kind of saying that normies don't think of collateralized asset loans when they think of typical loans. And then the more severe comment was his attacks on yield. Here's the big one. So the yield comes from borrowers trading fees, right? So this worries me because it feels like an Ouroboros. The value of crypto tokens is that you can use them to earn yield, which is paid for by people trading crypto tokens. And he kind of goes on to explain his position, but this is basically a quick synopsis of how all of Aave and Ethereum DeFi work. And he's kind of saying that it worries him, which feels like something that should raise perhaps some alarm bells. I don't know. It seems like kind of a big deal. I'm curious if you had any thoughts or reactions to Vitalik here this morning.
I actually agree with it. That's the thing. I do think that DeFi farming for other DeFi coins is kind of a bit of a Ponzi, right? This is why from the start it's always kind of felt like that. You obviously have to believe in an underlying value in the token itself, and often these DeFi tokens themselves are just like governance tokens. But I do think that if you're doing a liquidity pair of, let's say, on Uniswap of a stable and ETH or a stable and I don't know an L1, I can understand why that would be, and maybe even L1 to L1. But I think when it's kind of, you put it into here and you get this governance token on the back of it, and we still haven't worked out how that governance token even makes money, or if the way it makes money is purely from the users themselves, and there's no other outside value being put in. Yeah, it can feel pretty Ponzi-like. But I think that's been a question about DeFi literally from the start. It's just interesting to see him kind of just say, yeah, it's all a bit of a Ponzi. This is I think the protocols behind DeFi are actually very interesting, like the AMMs, some of the decentralized lending, perps, all that sort of stuff. I think are genuinely interesting, and it's okay if it's just for speculation. If the use case for these coins is just speculation, but yeah, the idea of like the yield itself and some of these things can be pretty dumb. I do think as well they provide the rails for a real world asset sort of ecosystem to be built, and so maybe we're just playing with funny money until that kind of happens.
That seems to be where he's going, and I think he's got additional comments in this thread kind of pointing to real world assets coming on chain, right, and perhaps more like real yield coming at that point in time in the future. But the talk certainly catches some fire.
Well, I kind of think he does speak the truth. He's not he's a very, very smart man, very, very clearly. Like, he does see through things. He doesn't just look at the 1,000% APY and go like, oh my God, like
posting all of his
he's kind of he logically does go through the motions. But I do think this year, more than any other year, I've seen more controversial takes from Vitalik. Right, like what Beanie said there is kind of true. Like, at the moment, he came out basically the other day and said, "Don't vote for Trump," which I thought was kind of funny. Or basically said, like, don't align yourself with people just because of their politics, that sort of stuff, or don't trust them. He has kind of called NFTs bullshit before. He's now come out and basically called DeFi bullshit. He only really, you only ever really see like Vitalik sent this amount to this exchange and then they are for like donations or whatever. But he's so much more interested in crypto being used for social and public good. Yeah, that's his number one thing. And unfortunately, I would say 95% of the users are not doing that. So he often does clash at times.
Yeah, that's the disconnect, right? Is that 95% or more of users are here for number go up, even if they give lip service to other applications. And he seems to be really about the public goods. And this also came on the same weekend where the Ethereum Foundation was selling huge amounts of ETH. I think that I don't know if they sold $100 million, but that is that's the news that came out. That is their annual budget. And they kind of came under fire for perhaps not being as transparent about that spending. Then you've got folks like Udi coming out and defending them, saying that, hey, at least they're spending money to try to better the ecosystem versus like Sailor and MicroStrategy, who are just holding Bitcoin and not actively doing anything to help drive that crypto economy. So a few sides of that coin. Perhaps we'll dive into that later this week, but we only have a handful of minutes left in the show. We got to talk about NFTs. And Mando, you made a comment that got folks going a little bit here on the timeline. So you called out some floor prices here and their changes since Blur season 3 ended. DGOT's up 150%, Rec Guy up 100%, Azuki up 70%, Bored Apes 70%, Pudgy's up 35%, Punks up 25%. All while ETH NFT volume down 35%. Kind of obvious what happened here in retrospect. So kind of alluding to the Blur farmer impact. Curious if you want to elaborate on your thoughts at all, or how you've been thinking about the NFT ecosystem since.
Yeah, look, I think it's obviously this is slightly a reductive take. Like there are other things as a factor here, but I was calling it out as it was going lower, like NFT floor prices. People were being rewarded for trading, and you can see this. Like all the main Blur farmers, or a lot of them, lost money, but they were in it because they got the Blur airdrop, right? That was definitely the case in season 2, and even towards the end of season 3. Like people were farming, and they were okay to lose money on the NFT trading because they were going to get an airdrop, which means they were okay to sell these assets which they bought down lower and lower and lower. For them, they would be rewarded in the back end. So it was very, very clear that was going to be a drag. Now there are other drags, obviously, but it did allow for like a more fertile ground for other assets to be the left curve part of this space, to see a lot more of the gambling side of things. And, I just listed those NFTs. You go through 90% of like the top ETH NFTs, they bottomed basically that week.
Yeah.
That week. There was another retest when the market absolutely tanked, end of July, early August, where ETH, went to 2,000, all that stuff, and ETH NFTs really felt bad then too. But even then, they didn't break through the lows that we saw as soon as the farming ended. And there was a lot of talk at the time, higher volume would lead to a better ecosystem, but it didn't. Like people just didn't understand why the volume was there. And I think this now proves it. Like you're now getting to a slightly more liquid market. People who are buying these assets are buying them because they want to own them, not because they're farming some separate coin down the line. And I think you're getting to a slightly better appreciation of not just floor NFTs too. Like you're starting to see some of the mid tiers and high tier stuff trade as well, which I think is getting back to the uniqueness of the asset, which is what makes it a better asset. The one exception here is CryptoPunks, but over that period, number one, they weren't farmed anywhere near as much as the others, at least in terms of time, and it was only the wrapped CryptoPunks, right, which is a much smaller piece of the collection, which were basically having this happen. And then you had 2 or 3, like some of the biggest CryptoPunk holders were like exiting over the last 2 months, right? As soon as ETH kind of went down, a few of them decided, right, I need to get out. So it's reductive, obviously, as a take, but I also think it's so obvious. It is just so obvious. And anyone who's denying it, I just think, I don't know, like I would love to hear why. Because for me, the takes that say it isn't, they just don't make sense to me. I'm not saying that NFTs, where they were when Blur started to where they are now, like all of that was Blur. Not saying that at all. I'm just saying that the impact was undeniably would cause these farmers to drag prices down because they would be making money on the other side. So I think we're now in a much stronger environment. I do think a lot more left curve risk taking will happen in this stuff. I don't think they're like 10x sort of assets, these, unlike meme coins where you see these like crazy moves, but they're kind of like long term. Like I was speaking to OSF about this on Friday. Like I think you could see a 3x in a lot of these, actually, or at least a 2.5x. And kind of that's what a lot of people are also here to make. They also have ETH. So could like Pudgies go to 25? Could Bored Apes go back up to like 30? Miladies go to 10? Like, yeah. Could Azuki go to 10? I actually, maybe some of the mid tiers will be a bit more difficult, I think. But I do think that like money will can flow back into some of this space now. People feel, you speak to any NFT trader right now, I think they feel a bit more like we've kind of seen the lows.
Yeah. I mean, Cyrus said as much. I think it's hard to argue that farming didn't impact the NFTs at this point. We don't need to rehash the whole argument. It's a shame it's not a controlled experiment. I've seen those who are trying to defend it. They're pointing to other NFTs that are pumping that weren't farmed, like Solana NFTs or ordinals, which also posted a very solid week. We had a lot of the ordinals up 10 to 20%.
Were ordinals as a whole up during that period, though? A lot of ordinals were down. When I looked through ordinals, it was far more mixed. Solana NFTs, I would agree, they did bounce, but Solana NFTs were not at any sort of the same scale as ETH NFTs. As money flows into ETH NFTs, you generally see a rise in everything.
And that's where I was going. I think there's also a potential explanation here that when the Ethereum NFT market feels healthier, it makes folks feel a little bit more confident in buying NFTs in what I'll call the beta markets, Bitcoin and Solana. That may not be the right term, but that's kind of how.
I think Solana for sure. Bitcoin, I feel ordinals has its own like ecosystem, but actually ordinals, if you look at the majority of them, that it was far more mixed. Like puppets and node monkeys and the quantum cats were kind of more mixed over that period.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the 7 day. If you look at the 30 days, still, a lot of them are still
right. Like it's not like that.
Right. Yeah, the ETH numbers are definitely different, and they're up quite a bit more. It's exciting. It's an exciting time to be back in the NFT market. You mentioned a potential 2 to 3x, and I think that's reasonable. And I feel like that's kind of where some of my personal targets are. The thing is, like, I mean, we've talked about memes outperforming as a potential alternative. I don't know, I can't point to that many memes with confidence I think are really going to 2.5 to 3x from here.
I think that's a very important thing to say, and that's basically what I'm getting at here. Is like people feel a bit more confident in the risk reward of NFTs. With memes, you can maybe like, oh, I'll get like Frog, which did like a 2x this. But you also feel like they could fall out of bed and go to 0. And it feels like with a lot of these, actually, you might get a retest. Maybe Bored Apes go back to like 12, 11, something like that. But it does feel like the risk reward here is like they could go down 3 at ETH, but they could also now 2x. So I think the risk reward is a lot better.
Yeah. You could go on a week-long vacation or a 2-week vacation with these leading ETH NFTs.
Right.
It's harder to go on a 2-week vacation with Flog and not touch it for 2 weeks. That's no offense to Flog. Any of the mid-tier memes, right, that you think could 2 to 3 to 5x from here.
Yeah.
So the point is made. Mando, I know that you have to go here soon. Folks, I think we hit on all the topics here for today. We'll do a longer show tomorrow. We've got Jeebs coming on with us. So shout out to Jeebs. Excited to have him. And then we'll have Logan Hitchcock coming later in the week. We'll have some other surprise guests, co-hosts as well, and perhaps dive deeper into memes and NFTs, which we did a little bit lighter coverage of here this morning. But for today's show, I think we will go ahead, wrap it up here. Have a great Monday, everybody. We will be back at our same time tomorrow morning, Tuesday, for another great episode of FOMO Hour. For today, everybody.